All right, welcome back, guys. Today we're going to be going over letter 28, okay, and that is on travel as a cure for discontent. So we'll just jump into this here. And he says, do you suppose that you alone have had this experience? Are you surprised as if it were a novelty, that after such long travel and so many changes of scene, you have not been able to shake off the gloom and heaviness of your mind? You need a change of soul rather than a change of climate. Though you may cross vast spaces of sea, and though, as our Virgil remarks, land and cities are left astern, your faults will follow you whithersoever you travel. So I think this is really, really important here, right? So he's saying here that, if you think maybe you've gone on vacation before, and if you think that if you go on a vacation that you'll feel better and you just need to get out of the city or go somewhere exotic. And he's saying that it doesn't matter, right? You know this, that when you come back, you feel that gloom, that heaviness of your mind, that you're still not able to shake it. And the reason why is because your faults follow you with wherever you go. So you still have you, and that you can't escape that. So he says in verse 2, Socrates made the same remark to one who complained. He said, why do you wonder that globe-trotting does not help you, seeing that you always take yourself with you? The reason which you set you wandering is ever at your heels. What pleasure is there in seeing new lands or in surveying cities and spots of interest? All your bustle is useless. Do you ask why such flight does not help you? It is because you flee along with yourself. You must lay aside the burdens of the mind. Until you do this, no place will satisfy you. So this applies more than just to travel, right? But essentially what he's saying here is he's saying the reason why you left to go travel, okay, is exactly the reason why it's not going to help you, okay? So the reason that set you going off on this trip is still following you along. It's because of you. It's because of your mind, because you haven't settled your mind, right? And so you can't escape it. You have to deal with it, right? And there's so many problems in life that we try to escape instead of trying to deal with. And what he's saying here is it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how far you go. You're still going to take yourself with you. So you actually have to deal with these problems. In verse 3, he says, reflect that your present behavior is like that of the prophetess who Virgil describes. She is excited and goaded into fury and contains within herself much inspiration that is not her own. The priestess raves, if happily she may shake the great God from her heart. You wander hither and yon to rid yourself of the burden that rests upon you, though it becomes more troublesome by the reason of your very restlessness. Just as in a ship, the cargo, when stationary, makes no trouble, but when it shifts to this side or that, it causes the vessel to heel more quickly in the direction where it has settled. Anything you do tells against you, and you hurt yourself by your very unrest, for you are shaking up a sick man. So what he's saying here is he's saying that, look, not only is it that you can't get away from yourself, okay, and that's why the travel's not gonna help you, but you're going all these places, okay, to try and get rid of this burden, but what's happening is that you're actually shaking it up, just like in a ship. If the cargo is stationary, there's no problem. It doesn't make as much trouble. But when it shifts to one side, then when the ship turns, it pulls to that side. It causes it to be more unstable, and so it's shooken up. And so he's saying that you're going to actually make things worse. You're shaking up a sick man. In verse 4, he says, that trouble once removed, all change of scene will become pleasant. Though you may be driven to the uttermost ends of the earth, in whatever corner of the savage land you may find yourself, that place, however forbidding, will be to you a hospitable abode. The person you are matters more than the place to which you go. For that reason, you should not make the mind a bondsman to any one place. Live in this belief. I am not born for any one corner of the universe. This whole world is my country. So what he's saying here is that, look, once you get rid of this trouble, once you actually deal with your mind, then you can go anywhere and you're going to be happy. It doesn't matter where you go, right? You don't have to think that you're going to go somewhere. And this is the problem, is that a lot of people think if they change their situation, if they change their external situation, if they move somewhere, if they had more money, if they had these things, right? This is all the same type of thing, is that then things would be good. And what he's saying is it doesn't matter. If you don't fix the thing that is broken, like why you're really upset, which is your mind, yourself, then it doesn't matter where you go. It doesn't matter what you have. You're still going to be upset. But once you do fix it, then it doesn't matter what conditions you have. You could be happy in any condition. If you saw this fact clearly, you would not be surprised at getting no benefit from the fresh scenes to which you roam each time through weariness of the old scenes. For the first would have pleased you in each case, had you believed it wholly yours. As it is, however, you are not journeying. You are drifting and being driven, only exchanging one place for another, although that which you seek to live well is found everywhere. So he's saying that it doesn't matter where you go. All right, you're just kind of drifting around. If you had already dealt with the problems, if you're already content, then you would have been content with the first place you went. But you're not actually journeying. You're just drifting. You're just being driven to different places. And so you're looking to live well. That's your goal. So you're trying to find happiness, but it's found everywhere. There's no specific place. Can there be any spot so full of confusion as the forum? Yet you can live quietly even there, if necessary. Of course, if one were allowed to make one's own arrangements, I should flee far from the very sight and the neighborhood of the forum. For just as the pestilential places assail even the strongest constitution, so there are some places which are also unwholesome for a healthy mind, which is not yet quite sound, though recovering from its ailment. So he's saying, look, you could even be happy in the forum, which, the political arena. But he's saying, obviously, if you didn't have to live there, you wouldn't want to, because it can corrupt even it can even a healthy mind. So best to stay away from that place. But let's move on. He says, I disagree with those who strike out into the midst of the billows and, welcoming a stormy existence, wrestle daily in that hardihood of soul with life's problems. The wise man will endure all that, but will not choose it. He will prefer to be at peace rather than at war. It helps little to have cast out your own faults if you must quarrel with those of others. So he's saying, look, also, don't just go somewhere that is hard because it's hard, thinking that will improve you. Because the thing is, a wise man's going to endure these things, but he's not going to seek them out. That's just not very smart at all. And the thing about it is that, it would be better to just be in a peaceful place than at war. And if you've dealt with your own problems, why should you deal with other people's problems? Not a good plan, right? So he says in verse 8, says 1, there were 30 tyrants surrounding Socrates, and yet they could not break his spirit. But what does it matter how many masters a man has? Slavery has no plural, and he who has scorned it is free, no matter amid how large a mob of overlords he stands. So he's saying here that it doesn't matter. Like, once you have freed yourself, right, essentially, right? And how do you free yourself? He talks about this in the previous letters, is getting rid of the fear of death, scorning life, right? And once you've done that, it doesn't matter how many masters you have. Like slavery, if you're a slave, you're a slave. But if you're not a slave, then it doesn't matter how many masters. So that's important to know as well. And he says in verse 9, it is time to stop, but not before I have paid duty. The knowledge of sin is the beginning of salvation. This saying of Epicurus seems to me to be a noble one, for he who does not know that he has sinned, does not desire correction. You must discover yourself in the wrong before you can reform yourself. So this is really important too, right? It's very basic, but very simple, but true, is in the fact that if you don't know what you're doing wrong, then you cannot know how to fix the thing, or even that you need to fix the thing. And so it is important that you actually figure out that you're doing something wrong. All right, and then he says in verse 10, some boast of their faults. Do you think that the man has any thought of mending his ways who counts over his vices as if they were virtues? Therefore, as far as possible, prove yourself guilty, hunt up charges against yourself, play the part, first of accuser, then of judge, last of intercessor. At times be harsh with yourself. Farewell. So he's actually saying here that some people actually boast of their faults, right? And you might say, well, that's weird. But actually, probably you do it, right? So many times we say things that we're like, I'm just stubborn, or I'm just angry, or I'm just proud, or whatever it is. We actually boast of the fault. We know that it's a fault, but we don't acknowledge it as such. And so what he's saying is, look, don't try and figure out why you're good. Try to figure out why you're bad. Instead, try to prove yourself guilty. Hunt up charges against yourself. Like, try to figure out the things you're doing wrong. Okay. You got to first be the accuser, then the judge, and then at last the intercessor. So then you can fix the problems, right? At times you have to be harsh with yourself. You have to actually don't just assume you're doing the right things. Look for what is wrong with what you're doing so that you can actually form correction, because otherwise you'll deceive yourself and you'll start lifting up your vices as virtues, believing that the things that are wrong are actually the good things. And then you'll have no hope of changing them. All right. We'll see you again tomorrow.